this will never eliminate our need for wildlife services. We still have wildlife services controlling conflicts today with mountain lions and bears. And we're going to have them in the future with wolves. But this allows us to try to address conflicts in populations at the population level as opposed to just at the single individual or at the single conflict. We're able to move the population in concert with livestock problems and with ungulate problems, ungulate prey-based problems. The conflicts that I'm talking about here are not just livestock, but also big game ungulate problems. And then the outside season length on that, the bottom of that table is August 30 to March 31st. This is another table. This is kind of the meat of the plan, but again, I'm just showing this so that you'll recognize when you look at the plan or when you look at the posters. But what that shows is on the left side you have your wolf BAU, then you have your conflict levels and your potential for conflict, current conflict levels for livestock and ungulate, your potential for conflict, your current wolf population, and then your short-term harvest strategy, which I just showed you that previous table, then your current breeding pairs and packs, wolves, number of wolves, and to kind of go through that, how that presents itself. Again, now this plan may seem complicated for those of you that are out here, and this is really a fish and game plan, how we're managing wolves. But a lot of you guys and folks have come here for us to see, well, how many wolves are they going to kill? And we're not there yet. That comes through an annual season setting process where we actually recommend quota levels, that sort of thing. But we're actually, what we're talking about here is how we're proposing to go about setting this structure. And then the next step, which all of you folks will have an opportunity to comment on, is harvest levels in each of these BAUs. But if we go here, for an example would be, for instance, the McCall-Weiser zone. Remember that? Everyone knows where that area is in the eastern part of the state. We have low ungulate conflicts currently, the status, but very high or high livestock conflicts. We have annual conflicts over in that area, a lot of mixed private and public land, high conflict with livestock, high potential for livestock conflicts as well. We have stable to slightly increasing wolf populations, particularly in the western part. So what is the short-term strategy? What is that table 6.1? That first table. Decrease numbers in conflict areas, then stabilize the population. So initially you decrease and then you stabilize. You're decreasing wolves in part of the AU where you're having conflicts. But you kind of want to stabilize that population. So you don't want to drive that population out of there necessarily, but you will in some areas try to drive that population down. And then you go from 4 breeding pairs that are currently there to range from 1 to 4. You could have 4 breeding pairs in there if they weren't causing any problems. If there weren't any ungulate problems, there weren't any livestock problems, they were just wolves out there. But if they are, then you knock them down. So then you get into the modify that table 6.1 strategy. You modify wolf density and high conflict, general harvest. What we'd go to would be a general harvest and or trapping with fairly high quotas in parts of that unit. Fairly high quotas would allow fairly high harvest in parts of that unit. You might even have depredation hunts with the quota if it's around. You can't get at it with the general season like some of our deer and elk populations. And of course, wildlife services control. Other part of the plan, our stakeholder groups try to make it very clear that in order to balance the plan out, even though it's a harvest plan, that some members of the stakeholder group and certainly members of the public would like to see wolf viewing areas. So how do you go about designing or providing for wolf viewing areas? Well, obviously, wolf view or deer and elk viewing occurs in amidst deer and elk hunting. You can watch big game animals anywhere in the state at any time of the year, so it certainly can occur, even though we're allowing harvest and fairly high levels of harvest in some areas. But in order to balance out the plan, we proposed wolf viewing areas. But how would you go about doing that? Well, you'd have to provide areas with a balance for, this is for non-consumptive users, areas where conflicts are low and the stakeholders can coexist with wolves. In other words, you wouldn't want to necessarily impose a viewing area on top of private land if the landowners aren't on board with it. That wouldn't be a very good thing to do. And so you have to look through that and say, well, if we're going to have a viewing area on this piece of private land, or in this large area, then the landowners that are in there have to agree to that, or we don't have it. And opportunity to actually see wolves, and restrictive harvest and control actions within that area. Now, if you do have livestock problems, there has to be an agreement how you would address those livestock problems. In other words, would you go at it with totally non-lethal actions to try to reduce livestock problems? Could you agree with the producers that you would go at it that way, or low-level control actions? Or how about ungulate impacts? If there are ungulate impacts in there, then we have to provide some level of wolf reduction if it's related to ungulate problems. So there's ways to approach this, but you have to be careful on how you do it. So the plan timeline. The November 19th commission put the November 16th commission meeting, the commission directed staff to release the plan to the public. So the plan, they reviewed the plan, said it's good to go to the public for their review. We've already had some, stakeholders look at it, but now it's your time to look at it. The rest of you, we're hoping that you have an opportunity between December 19th and the open houses here until December 31st to review the plan, to comment on it if you think we're in the ballpark, kind of on the target page, whether we're way off base. We don't really care about the opinions of you should kill them all or shouldn't kill any. That's not what this plan is about. This plan is about olive ocean population management. So that means that some wolves will be killed. And that's what we're looking at, is how we're going about this and how we're going to do this in a balanced fashion. At the end of January, I've already hired an analyst to review all of the comments. I don't know how many we'll get. If it was a normal fish and game plan, we might get a few hundred, maybe 1,000, but this being wolves, we might get several thousand, maybe tens of thousands. Who knows? March 5th, the commission will, from the end of January through February, we'll incorporate comments and address them as best we can. Look at it if we really missed the boat somewhere and that there were some good comments and suggestions that we can add or change to the plan. And then we will provide the plan to the commission a couple weeks before the March 5th commission meeting, the revised plan with all the comments. And at that time, the commission will decide whether to go ahead with it. At that time, we will also provide the commission with a mock-up of what the first hunting season might look like, the rules brochure with all the rules and regulations and quotas for that commission meeting, should wolves be delisted and they recommend a hunting season. It's up to the commission to decide when wolves are delisted, when and if we'll have a hunting season. And that decision will be made on the 5th. And again, delisting is anticipated no earlier than the end of March. So with that, I've gone on probably too long here, but are there any questions on that?